This is the dirty, disgusting turbo from the last video, by the way. My car has a very basic spec, works really well. Like, really, really well. It's reliable. Well, it makes a lot of power, and it's got a very big power band. Like, very big, considering. The reason it's like that is because I'm quite good at, from experience and just from knowing engines and how they work, I'm quite good at making an educated guess on what's going to work and what's not with spec-ing engines. Because no matter what people say, it's always an educated guess. You get as much data as you can, as much experience as you can, but there's too many variables that you can never be fucking 100%. I don't care what anyone says. Anyone that thinks it can be 100% don't know shit about engines. Simple as that. It's always an educated guess. There's just too many variables. Hence why 99% of the world told me what I was doing, or most of the parts I was doing, was wrong. Yet, lo and behold, together, what I've done has worked out better than 99% of the world's fucking setups with far less money. So, yeah, it's funny like that. That's just how things are. But because I've made it so good on my first attempt, because it was no like, a lot of people will go through 20 setups before they get it as good as mine. I did it straight from the off, just like that. But because it's already so good, it kind of pains me. Well, it doesn't pain me, but it troubles me what I do next, because I don't want to fuck it up. I'm pretty confident, don't get me wrong, I won't fuck it up in the way you might think. It's got to be, whatever I do, any of my options that I'm thinking of, will all be wildly faster than how it is. I would say no less reliable, even though they're probably making way more power. And spool won't be wildly affected either. But it's so good as it is, because I got it right first time, which is partially luck and partially because I know what I'm doing, that this time round I'm even more analytical on what changes I want to make, because I don't want to spoil what's such a good setup already. And that's the thing with engines. I've always said it, but engines have to be spec'd as a whole. You can't just choose the good bits off 20 different engines you've seen on the internet, bolted together, and presume that's going to work, because that normally makes a pile of shit. That's also probably why my car seems such a weird setup to most people, because 99% of the parts aren't what most people would use, and 99% of the parts they've seen on other cars, and they don't perform like they do on mine. Because that's just, it's a combination of everything. And that's the tricky thing this time around as well. If you was doing like data analysis, you would change one part at a time. But I'm not doing that. I just want to enjoy my fucking car. So I ain't got the time or the money to change one thing at a time. And also, when you change one thing at a time, because I said about engines working as a whole, none of those single things will be optimal anyway. Like the turbo, I know for a fact the compressor is fairly maxed out, flow-wise. Turbine is getting close, I know that for a fact. There's more to come, but is it worth leaving it when I know the compressor is maxed out and the turbo's getting close? Debatable. Head ports. If you were doing real data collection, you wouldn't change the turbo and the head. But I know for a fact the head is a restriction, that's just well proven, at way below the level I'm on. So maybe I will be able to make more power even with the current head. But I'm already making way more than is known as a restriction for that head. So common sense says I should change it. The only issue is then, bigger ports, higher flow, means lower air velocity, which technically means less low down power and slower spool. But how much and where? Who knows? Can't find any good data on that. And again, it's going to vary on setups. It depends how big your turbo is. It depends on so many things. I will almost certainly make more power at the same boost level because the head's flowing more. But how much will I be giving up low down, if any? Genuinely don't know. I can make my estimates, but I don't know. But a bigger turbo, a bigger head, it works together. Same with the inlet manifold. Supposedly, the inlet manifold I'm running is wildly restrictive, even at 400 brake. I've already said before, I believe that's the runners, and I'm not using the runners. I don't believe the plenum was a restriction at anywhere near that level, hence how I'm making well over 500 without nitrous and well over 600 with nitrous. Well, with nitrous and more boost. But anyway, at the level I'm on now, I'm fairly sure it's some restriction now. I don't think it really, it's not until way higher than people think. But at the level I'm on now, yeah. So, going back to everything working as a whole, it makes sense if I'm going bigger turbo to also go bigger head, to go bigger inlet, because they're all similar restriction at this level. None of them might be truly fucking maxed out, but unless you want to do things one at a time, which costs a lot of money and a lot of time, which I don't have either, as much as that is good for data, it's not good for my fucking sanity or wallet. So that ain't happening. I have to use it makes it more of an educated guess, but not that much more, personally. I've got to make a guess on how much more RPM or how much RPM I'm losing. Because the thing is, the bigger port head will no doubt lose me some low RPM grunt. But I don't even know if it'll lose it. I don't care under about 4,000, 4,500. And it might hardly lose me any as high as that. Same as the inlet manifold. Bigger inlet plenum, on a single throttle engine especially, does lose low down on a boosted engine versus not. But by how much? Or where? It's always lower down. Will it matter at the RPM where I care about? 4,500 up? Probably not. Don't know though. I don't think it'll be significant, but again, educated guess. I know my cams are fine. My cams are pretty mild, but they're also exactly what I want. Me personally, I don't like big cams. I just want cams that will allow the power to be made to the RPM I want them to. The rest of it I can make work with boost. And the fact that my cams hold the power, even with a small port head, to well over 8,000 RPM, means that's fine. I mean, because the bigger the cam, that is something that really does fuck your low down power up. So mine being relatively mild, yet pulls to 8,000 plus is perfect for me. Thing is, I know these cams that I'm running, people have ran well over 1,000 horsepower on them, so I'm in no rush to change them. Yeah, I know bigger cams would get you more power and less boost, but they also change your power band wildly. I like it as it is. I'm not chasing power figures. I want more power, but I wouldn't give up how it drives too much for that. The question is, well, I want a bigger turbo. It needs a bigger compressor. I want a 58mm at the moment, which is too small. If I was on even if it was on a 60 or 62, I'd probably leave the turbo and do the head and intake first and see what happened. But on a 58, I'm 99% sure it's fairly getting close to maxed out how it is. It's got 64mm turbine, which I don't think is maxed out. I'm fairly certain it's not. And with a bigger compressor, that alone will drop turbine back pressure, because it'll be trying less hard to push the air, because it's not screaming the compressor so hard. I don't want, I reckon a 64, as in 64 inducer compressor, and stay in the current size turbine is what I would do, turbo-wise. I'm in two minds whether I want to stick with a normal turbine wheel or go to a Zona style UHF 5+5 blade jobby. Because, I don't know. Thing is, if you read the internet talk and, you know, the sales talk, you'd think that's the best thing in the world. But fact is, you can't have your fucking cake and eat it. It don't work like that. So yeah, they're proven to drop back pressure for any given turbine size massively. And from what little data I've had, most people who seem to have said it's lost very little spool. But how much is very little? There's very little data on that. I don't believe for a second it speeds up or doesn't affect it. You're literally removing half the fucking blades. And the less, you know, the less blades on anything, there's less exhaust gas pushing on to spin the fucking thing. So by rights, it should not spool as fast. Yeah, there's less weight on the wheel, so it should turn easier. But that's like saying, oh, you know, we should all have 3-blade turbine wheels and compressor wheels and it would be the fastest spooling thing going. It's like, don't work like that. So, but all the data I've seen does seem to say the spool isn't much lower. So, and some people say none. So I am kind of sort of, I mean, that's the one bit I'm in two minds about. I'm pretty set on my compressor. Turbine wise, I don't know about that. It's a fucking tricky one, really. Because the thing is, you've got all of these things. Again, it's like building things as a whole. I'm going to lose something, probably, by a bigger port head. I'll lose something, probably, by a bigger inlet plenum. I'll lose something, probably, by a higher flowing turbo. But how much does all that add up to? In my best guesses of the specs I'm going to go to, won't be much. But it still makes me worry just because I've got it so right the first time. I'm reluctant to fucking... I want to try and get it right this time too. Because the thing is, the one thing I didn't do on mine is fit a pre-turbine back pressure sensor, EMAP, as a lot of people would call it, exhaust manifold pressure. Well, exhaust manifold absolute pressure, if you want to know what EMAP stands for. And that would tell me if I'm at a turbine wheel, which is useful if I'd have fitted it. But it doesn't tell me all the other factors, as in how much difference that different wheel would make in spool. It doesn't tell me what the intake manifold change would be. It doesn't tell me what the port-in change would be. So yeah, it's more data, but it's not fucking the be-all and end-all. And that's the trouble with data. There's so many variables. You have to just make your best. I saw it written somewhere once. A guy who does a lot of tuning, American guy from years ago, and he called it swag. This is long before swag was any kind of fucking gay TikTok term like it was about fucking 10 years ago. Swag, for him, it stood for scientific wild ass guess. As in, you use as much data and info as you've got, but it's still a fucking guess because there's too many variables no matter what to be sure of exactly how your car's going to perform. It's an educated guess when it comes down to it. You can educate yourself as much as you like. That's why I don't make a big deal about compressor mats. So it's like, oh, but have you got the compressor mat for that turbo? So what if you fucking have? What does that tell you? It'll tell you roughly the amount of boost for the amount of power in an ideal situation. It doesn't tell you fuck all you know about spool. it doesn't tell you much because your engine almost certainly isn't the ideal situation. Even if you've got one of those, you know, they're online, I think Borgward and Garrett do them, like a turbo calculator thing. It's not that accurate. Fucking hell. Good example of things not being that accurate would be, there's a guy on YouTube I follow Eric Weingartner, does V8 stuff, porting heads mostly, heads and intakes. He did a cam challenge recently. Basically, told everybody these specs, these engines, these exact, spec of this engine, he's got a dyno. Told me the exact specs of everything, the exact rules of this dyno test. Said if people have got the bottle, build themselves a cam for this engine. You know, whatever spec you want, it just has to be for this engine and it has to work on this spec. Send it in, I'm going to test them all, and let's see who wins. And I think the winner got money too. And mostly it's going to be bragging rights and show, you know, to show these companies are experts. And a good example of the, you know, these calculators don't do fuck all is one of the entrants was David Vizard, UK guy, old UK tuning people might remember. He's in America doing mostly American stuff these days, but he used to be like a big UK tuner, and he knows his shit. Fucking hell, he's like 80 something, and you know, he's been through it all. But he has this like, he's got a lot of like computerized calculator things that he uses, that he's designed. And before this test happened, he was making a big deal. Oh, you know, I'm a shoe-in to win. I'm blatantly going to win, blah, blah, blah. The program says so, blah, 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 blah. Fucker came 14th. His results were good, but he came 14th place. The winner's a fucking bloke I'd never even heard of. So, yeah. Trying to think you know everything just because some fucking calculations or some data says so, don't work like that. Does not fucking work like that. So, yeah, it's a lot of guessing, but it's educated guessing. And sometimes you're right, sometimes you're not. While I'm not I'm not someone who feels very confident in myself that often. One thing I am quite confident in is when it comes to specking engines to go fast. And I'm only confident in that because of the results I get. It's like this fucking, my current 180. I literally, well, used to that, I didn't spend any money. It's all cheap stuff, but I basically chose cheap stuff that felt like it worked to me better than a lot of the expensive stuff. And lo and fucking behold, it did. Because I don't cheap out on everything. I cheap out if I can get the stuff I want for the right money. Certain things, unfortunately, cost some money. So I spent the money there. But I spend as little as I can. I just choose the right things because I know it's not what you spend. You don't get what you pay for. I don't give a fuck what people say. And this is going to be the same. It's like, actually, you know what? Speaking of cheap stuff, one thing I've not mentioned in this is my exhaust manifold. I'm still on that cast SPA twin scroll cheap manifold. I don't really think that's a restriction yet. I'm 99.9% sure a fancy, really well-made tubular one would be better. But do I want to go to the effort, even though Thomas will make me one? I don't like asking favours of anybody. Do I really want to go to the effort and feeling bad from someone who, I'm not one for somebody doing me favours. It's just like, Thomas has been like, I'll make you one. It's like, I don't know. People doing anything for me never sits well to me. I mean, it's bad because I'm always helping people. And, you know, I do appreciate it if people help me, but I never like to ask anybody. And I also feel bad when people do. Grateful, but I feel guilty. But anyway, so yeah, because of that, and I'm not convinced the exhaust manifold is a restriction. I think I'll probably, when I am, going to stick with the standard manifold for now. And again, to some people, that thing might look really restrictive, but I've had a look at it. I mean, I own the fucking thing, and I don't really think it is. But again, scientific wild-ass guess. I might find after all this, it doesn't make that amazing power. And then one day I do change a manifold for another one, and suddenly the fucking car picks up a bloody 100 horsepower. Who knows? But I'm not chasing loads more power anyway. I just want more. I don't know. If I could get another... Well, I really think I do. I really think, because what I'm doing is removing restrictions, provided I'm not wrong and the exhaust manifold isn't a restriction, I could probably pick up another best part of 100 horsepower, maybe fucking more, without much difference in boost pressure, just from more flow. So, yeah, we'll see. Because as it is, you know, 2-bar boost on a HX40, I made 514. That's not that much for that turbo. And the reason will be because the head and or the intake, and if I'm wrong, the exhaust manifold, isn't flowing that well, because boost is a measure of restriction. You know, restriction to airflow. So boost pressure alone isn't a guide. You know, 30 psi on a hugely restrictive thing versus 1 psi on something with 0 restriction. The 1 psi thing could make 5 times the power. It's, you know, even the turbo I've currently got on it can make a lot more on a different engine at less boost. Shows it's not the turbo issue there. But the fact is, with the nitrous and whatever the power is making at that level, that turbo really is fucking maxed out there. So I still do need a bigger turbo regardless. Do you know what? I'm not even sure if I remember the point of this video. I think it's me just venting. I'm not 100% I know what to do. But I'm fairly certain. It's funny actually, there's a few other things I'm probably going to do. Well, I will be doing that people won't agree with. Like, this hasn't got the anti-surge slots, in my opinion. And again, there's arguments about this, but to me, it's just correct. You'll get more power, especially lower down, at lower boost levels, with no anti-surge, because it's not bleeding out the air, because that's what the anti-surge is meant to do. It makes the compressor less efficient, especially at lower boost pressures. So, spool up especially, because it's bleeding the air out. It's debatable argument. It's an argument. I don't know if it's proven or what, that when you're fucking proper maxing out a turbo, the anti-surge slots work backwards and they draw in air, so it can increase power for any given turbo. But that's when you're really, really maxing out the compressor, because that's why they're banned from certain tractor pull classes, because they're sucking it. You know, if you've got a restriction on intake, you know, compressor inducer size, but then you're sucking through allegedly sucking through the anti-surge slots, you can make more power for any given intake size. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the argument. But I do see some people who have said, including one person, I'm not going to say who he is, but one person who's very, very knowledgeable and very, very experienced, said to me he's only ever found that anti-surge improves things everywhere. But to be honest, his setups are always full-on mental drag cars, so maybe it's not really relevant what I'm talking about to his. But yeah, I want to go on non-anti-surge, partly because it sounds better, and partly because I'm fairly sure it'll help with, you know, lower down grunt, in all honesty. But yeah, lots of things to consider, lots of things I'm unsure about. And yeah, it's honestly now, it's mostly down to arguing with myself in my head whether I should stick with the current turbine, which I know works great and spools great, or go to a UHF style one, which definitely flows more, but I am fucking worried it fucks the spool up way more than people say. I'm more inclined to go for it and believe everybody, because you know, I'm talking data as well, not just pure bullshit. I've seen a few bits of data, not a lot, but a few people doing like true back-to-backs, and them saying it's given up very little. But that's about as good as it gets. I've seen more back pressure data than spool data, you see. Back pressure data every time was like, wow, it's much lower for the same size wheel of a normal design. But spool data, not seen so much, and that worries me a bit. But anyway, that's enough of my Turbo-Tech ramblings, and I'll see you next time. Maybe with something else rather than just staring at a shiny compressor wheel for fucking 20 minutes.